Okay guys, welcome to another video. In today's video I wanted to do a quick review on this Milwaukee M18 chainsaw. This saw has been out for a while now. It's not a new product. Like a lot of tools, like a lot of products, right when something's released, people are already giving you their like 2-year long-term review when it's only been out like 2 weeks, which I find pretty interesting, but that's the cool thing of YouTube. But this saw I bought kind of right when all the like pandemic COVID stuff started, so I guess like in 2020. So I've had it for a while. The first little bit when I had it, I didn't use it that much. But ever since we moved to this property, we should have kept count when we started, but we probably cut down about 100 trees. You can see it took down this guy. A lot of the trees we were taking down weren't this big. A lot of them were a lot smaller, pine, like some oak, some maple. But yeah, this saw has been really good. So I'll just go through the features of it really quick, and then the pros and the cons. I might do a cutting demo, and I'll probably talk about like the philosophy of why you might want a cordless one over your 2-stroke gas. So the features of this is one of the reasons why I bought it. If you already have like Ego cordless tools, don't get this, get an Ego, Ego chainsaw. If you already have like DeWalt, then get the DeWalt one, because then that way you have battery capability or compatibility between your tools. I happen to have all Milwaukee M18 tools, so this might not be the best cordless chainsaw, but what makes it the best is it just uses all the batteries that I have. So that's something to keep in mind. All these cordless saws perform pretty similar. So the features, well, I guess starting with the battery, because I'm about to pull it out just for safety. It takes your M18 Milwaukee batteries. This one's the 12.0. This kit came with the 12.0 amp hour battery, but you can use any M18 battery in this. The higher the amp hour, the more torque you're going to get, and the longer the run time. So you can use those little baby 2 and 3 amp hour, and if you use one of those, it makes the saw a couple pounds lighter. You just won't be able to cut as heavy. It'll bog down a little easier, and it really won't run for that long before you have to swap the battery out. So one kind of bad thing about the location of the battery, it's kind of easy to get to, but I think if they would have mounted it on the bottom, it would have reduced your center of gravity. Having it mounted on the top makes the saw kind of top heavy, but if the battery would have kind of slid in from the bottom, but that's something. But the battery, it has your chain brake. So before you think your battery's dead, make sure that's not engaged, because that just cuts off power to the bar. Your trigger, some of these triggers are more complicated than others. I think all of them, maybe it's a law, but all of them need this like kind of safety lock. And that's a good thing, because if you were to trip and fall with this and accidentally pull the trigger, that could land you in the hospital. But the thing to keep in mind with this style is, and I'm demoing this with my left hand, I'm right-handed, but if you're left-handed, it's kind of weird. You have to like torque your hand then pull it. So it is set up for right-handers. I normally hit it with my thumb, and then once you pull the trigger, you don't have to hold that in anymore. But if you're left-handed, it's just a little more awkward. Other designs have like a top ambidextrous safety. This one's really easy for right-handed people, but it's kind of a pain for left-handed people. One cool thing back here is it has one of those keyhole things, so if you can put a screw on the wall and just hang it. Pretty efficient way to store it, keeping in mind that that may cause the bar oil to leak out. I try not to keep bar oil in this because it leaks out. And there's videos on like how to fix it. I've never really watched those, and frankly I don't really care, because before you use the chainsaw, just fill it with oil, check your bar or your chain tension and all the regular stuff. But storing it like that, storing it pretty much any position may cause the oil to leak, but hanging it like that may cause it to leak a lot easier. The handle, the motor, I'm not going to take this apart. There's some videos how they take it apart. I'm not going to do that. So one thing I like is, there's a lot of things I like about this chainsaw, but one is the bar chain oil is, and I crank it pretty tight, but the way they design this knob, you can really crank down on it. That way while you're cutting, you don't look down and see all your oils just coming out of the lid. And then it has a little flat spot there. I don't use that, but that's for a scrunch, so you can tighten or loosen it. Speaking of the scrunch, one of the biggest things I like about this saw, and I don't know why more chainsaw companies don't do this, it has a built-in storage for a scrunch just stands for screwdriver and wrench combined, but it's your chainsaw tool. Some people call it a scrunch, some people call it a chainsaw. And as you can see, as I struggle to get it out, the good thing is it's kind of a pain to get out. That way it doesn't accidentally fall. But the bad thing is it's kind of a pain to get out. Now this, I just keep in here and I try not to use it if I have another one available. That way I know this is always there. And you can see it gets the job done. It's really small, but it's really convenient. A convenient size. One weird thing, I'm surprised they didn't paint this red to match the Milwaukee. And then also if you drop it in like leaves or something, red might be easier to see. Black sometimes can blend in with like dirt, but it's black, and pretty much you can use that to tighten the oil fill cap and to adjust the chain, to replace the chain, that type of thing. Like I said, it's short, but it's surprisingly pretty easy. Now I'm trying to keep this video kind of short, so I'm not going to tear it apart, but it's the same. If you have experiences with chainsaws, it's the same thing. One thing to keep in mind, these nuts aren't captive. A lot of the higher end gas saws, the nut is actually captive to this plate, so you can't accidentally lose and drop them. One recommendation, and I haven't done this yet, but what you could do is bring this, one of the nuts you could bring to the hardware store and try and find a compatible one that would thread onto here, and keep that as a spare, just in like your bag that you store this, or wherever you store it, just in case you drop one, you have one or two spares, because it's not a good thing to run a chainsaw if one of these is missing. A lot of the other consumer line saws have kind of a hokey tab you flip up, you loosen, it has a dial here to adjust the tension. This is just like your higher end professional saws, because in my opinion, after how much I've used it, it is a professional saw. So some people might prefer the toolless design. I like having to use this. It's just more secure. I've used those other types and they're just a pain, and in cold weather, if that tab breaks off, you're you could use like a pair of pliers to loosen it, but your tool is broken at that point, and then you have to contact the company, send it in for repair. So this keeps it simple. And like I said, the only downside is you could lose the nut. And then right here is the adjuster screw for the chain. This video I'm not going to walk through like how to adjust the chain. Some people like it loose, some people like it tight. The chain's a 16-inch low profile chain. Almost all the electric saws use a thinner. You can see how narrow it is, the bar and the chain. They're more likely to bend than your higher end powerful powerful saws, but they run a thinner chain pretty much to conserve power. You could change the bar and the chain out for a standard thickness chain, but you're going to reduce your runtime. And after, this is the original bar. I also bought a spare bar. You can get it on Amazon, they're really cheap, and then I have a couple spare chains on hand. But despite this being a thin profile, if you're kind of being smart with your cutting, the chain holds up and the bar hasn't bent or warped yet. So some people critique that these come with weak bars. If you're using this for a company, 40 to 50 hours per week, then this saw isn't really for you. But that's about all the features. Who is this saw for? It's technically a homeowner's saw. That's why I got it. I use chainsaws professionally, but I wanted a chainsaw at home that I could use conveniently. And I normally use 2-stroke gas saws. This was the first cordless chainsaw I used, and I didn't really have high expectations of it, but it turns out that it cuts really quick. So this is a homeowner saw with professional level quality. Like I said, if you're like a tree felling company, an arborist, or like you work for a power company and you have to like trim trees around power lines, most likely you should probably go with gas. But if you're like different types of contractors that you want a chainsaw and you already have other tools running your Milwaukee M18, this would be a good choice, because then you don't have to carry 2-stroke mixed fuel. You can just carry this, and if you have to use it, you can put a battery in. So yeah, it's more of a homeowner saw. It's not really a professional saw. With that being said, you can see this tree that it's sitting on. I measured it at about, see if I can get this. It's not counting the bark. It's about exactly 18-inch diameter. And the thing to keep in mind with chainsaws is this has a 16-inch bar, but you only have about 14 inches, about 14 and a half inches of actual usable bar. So generally people recommend whatever your bar length is. Like this saw, a lot of people recommend don't go over like 12 inches if you're cutting trees down, because then you have to, it's just a little more complicated. But, and I might roll the video footage in, the battery did end up dying. I think I was running the 6 or the 8 amp hour, and I had the 12 amp on the charger. But that was after a lot of cutting. But you can see that it made it all the way, almost all the way through, right? I did have to kind of maneuver the saw a little bit. But this saw is capable of cutting your firewood. It would be good to bring camping, like car camping. You can use it around your house for just trimming trees. And this is probably on the larger side of a tree you'd want to cut with this. So I think I'm going to do a quick cutting demo. Really quick. The thing to keep in mind with all these demos, because I've seen people compare like gas saws to this saw or different cordless saws, there's a lot of tests out there. The reason I think that's kind of a dumb way to compare is it comes down to how sharp your chain is. So if you have a super powerful gas saw with a dull chain and you're trying to sell people a cordless saw like this, because some of the reviews I saw, they did this, they had a like Stihl 460 or something, a large Stihl chainsaw, and when they were cutting you could tell it was throwing out sawdust, and then you can see this threw out like wood chips, and that's what you want to look for. If your saw's throwing out, like if you're getting the dust in your eyes, your blade or your chain is most likely dull. you kind of want it to be throwing chips out. So that's the thing to keep in mind. I'm not going to be comparing any saws. But I will do a cut demo with this quickly. So we have the 12, and this is the 6, and I have like an 8. I have a lot of batteries, but the 12. So we'll pause the video, just set up quick. I'm not going to cut a lot, but just to give you a demo. And go. So this is about 4 inches in diameter, and your chain brake, nothing. You pull it back, but just a small branch.
Okay guys, so as you can see, this thing, it cuts really well, but like I said, I don't think it's worth comparing two different makes of saw unless they're both the saws are dulled to the same level and then sharpened by the same person. If one has a slightly sharper blade, or even if a couple of the teeth are dulled on the other one, it'll make or break the test. You can have a massive chainsaw that just burns the wood and throws out sawdust, and you can have a really small saw like this with a sharp blade that is just like a laser cutting through logs. So there's a lot of the comparison tests, but I think it makes more sense just to review the saw on an individual basis. Make sure you have a sharp blade and the proper accessories to go with it, which I didn't really talk about because that's just basic chainsaw stuff. But bar oil, a scrunch which stores, obviously the batteries and a charger, a chainsaw file. Each blade you have to like look up the specific size. The one for this is a 5/32 file. Either you can hand file it or you can get some fancy sharpener, but a chainsaw without a file to resharpen it is kind of pointless, because the first little, you can be cutting firewood, you can be cutting logs, and you know, years ago someone might have nailed a fence staple into the tree and you don't see it, it's in the middle, and the chain hits it and you don't realize it. So if you don't have a file, you might as well not have a chainsaw, right? Or if you have the deep pockets, you can just buy like 20 chains, and when you dull one out, you can put a new chain on. Or if you need a new blade right there, you can do that and then sharpen it after the fact. But chainsaw file, bar oil, make sure you don't run a chainsaw without bar oil, because that'll cause the blade to bind. It'll cause the bar and the chain to heat up super hot. When it gets hot, the blades stretch out. If they get stretched out too much, then you can't really, you have to get a new chain, because it won't fit, it'll keep falling off. And then wedges, which I didn't talk about, they're over at the base of the tree, but felling wedges, even if you're just cutting firewood, generally to be cutting firewood you normally have to cut a tree down. So felling wedges, just for added safety. Some people don't use them. I think it's kind of pointless not to have them, just in case you need it, and maybe a small sledgehammer to go with it. Felling axes, and then safety gear. Like, I'm wearing gloves. When I was cutting the tree down, I was wearing a helmet and chaps. Once it's on the ground, I don't really wear a helmet, and normally hearing protection, but with this, I mean, even the person filming, they weren't having to cover their ears. It's really not that loud. It's, I would say, the same as maybe like a drill, just a different pitch, like a little more dull than a cordless drill, but it's a lot quieter than like a circular saw. Maybe it's about as loud as a Sawzall, but the noise of it isn't really all that loud, which is one of the big reasons why I like electric over gas, is you don't have to worry about earplugs. Earplugs, they get sawdust, and then you get sawdust in your ears, and it can cause ear infection. And then ear muffs, if it's really hot, they're collecting with sweat, and they're not that comfortable. But if you're running a gas saw, you kind of have to wear ear muffs. But yeah, the electric saws, that's the main reason why I like it. You also don't have all the two-stroke fumes in your face, especially if you're down low cutting a stump, or you know, doing a back cut and you're right up on the saw. Depending on how you orient that saw, all that exhaust is, you're breathing in. So if you're using a saw professionally, years of breathing in those fumes isn't the best for you. So that's another advantage. And just anecdotally, but I kind of use a lot of chainsaws. For whatever reason, I feel electric chainsaws don't gunk up as quick as gas saws do. They don't get as dirty, because you have to take this plate off because the bar oil mixes with the chips, but they don't really get as dirty. You don't have to worry about starting them. Electric saws, a lot of chainsaws, they can go down if your pull cord breaks. Then you have to like reinstall it, or maybe you don't have one, then you have to go to the store. Gas saws are definitely better for like if you're cutting 8 hours a day daily. But I've used this saw for a complete day when we probably cut down like 20 or 30 trees, and I just had all 3 of my battery chargers, and I had batteries on all of them, and then I had this, and I had a pouch with like a spare battery, so when it goes dry you just take the battery out, put a new one in. So as long as you have enough batteries, you can kind of keep up with gas saws. Obviously you have to charge the batteries, but you could also argue electric saws are cheaper with the price of gas being what it is. Or if you get the true fuel, I just had to buy a gallon of that, and I think that was like $20. These obviously you have to pay a little bit to charge them. The other benefit is like you can charge these off a solar system. You can charge these from your truck or your car. So if you're on some like off-grid property with no electricity, you could probably still charge this from your truck with an inverter. Or if you had one of those folding solar panels, you could charge it like that. There's a lot of advantages. The quietness. Sometimes you don't want to announce to the world that you're cutting a tree down. Like, we live in the country, but we have neighbors kind of close by. So the advantage of this is like it can be a weekend and I can be running this, but a normal chainsaw, it would just be annoying the neighbors, and you'd be that neighbor that's just making a ton of noise. So there's a lot of advantages to it being quieter. Weight, I don't know what this weighs, they're all kind of comparable. But yeah, I think that's it. This saw's been really nice. It took some getting used to. It has different ergonomics than I was used to Stihl chainsaws. It balances different. The body of it's long. One thing I didn't even talk about, and I put Sharpie on this just recently, but there's a line right here, and that's your sighting. That's your sight. So when you're trying to aim where you want a tree to fall, I just put black Sharpie so it's more visible, but you can sight down that to aim your tree. So that's pretty cool. I don't know if other like homeowner or battery powered saws have that. A lot of gas saws have it somewhere. You just have to watch a video or read the instruction manual and see where it is. But I think that's it. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Like, I've had this probably 3 years, and I was kind of hesitant because it's electric and you think it's going to be weak. But I've accidentally left this out in rainstorms. It's gotten wet. I've used it in cold weather, maybe like not super cold, maybe 30 degrees. I've used it in really hot weather. It's never overheated. You can stall it out if you just bear down on it, but if you have a sharp saw, it's actually really hard to stall this saw out. Like, you can actually put a lot of force behind it and it cuts really quick. So you kind of have to try on purpose to stall it out. I cut a couple logs up there and I was bearing down more than I normally do, and I was trying to get it to stall out on camera and it didn't. So that's pretty cool. It cuts quick, it's lightweight, you don't have to worry about two-stroke gas, you don't have to worry about starting. You might have people in your family who can use a chainsaw, but maybe they have upper body, like shoulder issues, so pulling starting a normal chainsaw might hurt their shoulders. With this, if they're strong enough to lift the chainsaw, they're strong enough to use the saw. So I think that's all I wanted to cover. Milwaukee makes other chainsaws now, like the hatchet and like a top handle saw, which if all you're cutting is small, like 1 to 2 inch diameter branches, one of those might be better. This saw is kind of awkward, but it cuts really quick. But that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Again, the Milwaukee, I don't know the model number, but it's just the Milwaukee 16-inch chainsaw. It came as a kit with a charger and a battery. But yeah, I really like this saw. I think you'll really like it too if you're in the market for a cordless saw. Like I said in the beginning, if you already have like DeWalt tools, get a DeWalt chainsaw. If you already have Ego outdoor power equipment, get an Ego. But if you have Milwaukee tools, get a Milwaukee. And if you have a combination of 2 tools, I would recommend the Milwaukee over other ones because I've used a handful of them and I like the Milwaukee the most. So like always, you can go back to my homepage, watch some of my current videos. If you like what you see, feel free to subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next video.